Everybody, in this video, we're going to be looking at a free Series 3 card that you get the one choice a month. We got series drops coming in June. I always like to plan ahead and help people think about what they might want to save for. The last time we did this, we were talking about Luke Cage as being one of the more important cards. Here we are with the High Evolution meta taking over the universe and him being critical to that. So let's see if there is as impact of a card for the month of June. So this is where you choose your card every month. You get one selection per month. So it's important to think ahead about what you want to do. And you might want to wait until after the series drops to see what you want to pick up. Now, the hard part about that might be if you have a lot of series cards you need to get. If you wait, then the one that you might think you might want might not come back around again. So if you have a big pool, being ultra selective might be a little dangerous. To make things easier on you, we've got this graphic that we put together. We divide it into 3 sections. There's the must buy, the should buy, the maybe buy, just to kind of give you an idea of what you might want to look at. Within each section, there's a top row and a bottom row. We generally look at the top row as being a bit better than the bottom row, and the cards from the left being a little bit better than the cards on the right. It's not exact, but it gives you a little bit of an idea. With the changes to the series drops not necessarily being on a schedule anymore, it becomes a little bit more predictive on what we might get. So generally speaking, when I'm going to look at some cards, I might say, well, this card maybe is not top tier and not worthy of staying in either Series 4 and 5. So what we want to do real quick is look at Series 5, look at Series 4, and see if any of these cards might for sure be ones dropping. Look at, this is pool 5. We're on WolverSNAP-Pro. It's a good way to sort of sort through these pools. I also like having the tracker associated with this so you can see if you own it or not. They have the upcoming June pass cards in here, so we're just going to ignore these. Kitty Pryde, Nebula, Howard the Duck, none of those are going to drop. I do think Snow Guard is potentially worth dropping. The card is not very good. I don't think it's going to get any changes anytime in the next 3+ months. In my opinion, they should just immediately drop that to Series 3. Hitmonkey's not coming down. Jeff is not coming down. Evolutionary is a full-time big bad. Stegron, I think, is a potential to maybe drop to 4, but I don't think it will. Iron Lad's not coming down. Kang big bad, Galactus big bad, and then Thanos big bad. I don't think any of these are going to drop. Only potentials here are Snow Guard, loosely Stegron, but that's sort of a stretch. So now let's look at Series 4. Master Mold, maybe. I don't think so. I think Zabu is technically scheduled, if we had it anymore, to be dropping in June. I do think he's a potential. I have him on the graphic, so we'll talk about that a little bit later. Negasonic, I do not think is going to drop. I think Negasonic is still one of the more slept on cards in the game. Darkhawk, I think is going to be sticking in Series 4, unfortunately, for a little while. Shauna, I do think is a potential drop. Nimrod, very similar. I think he could also consider dropping. Stature, I thought about. With the changes to her, I could see them dropping her a little ahead of schedule. I do not have her on the graphic, though. There is a chance that they might want to leave her in Series 4 a little bit longer. And then MODOK and Null, 0 chance that those drop, in my opinion. So really, as far as cards that could be dropped that are going to show up on the graphic, it's really going to be Zabu and Shauna. So let's jump into the graphic. So here's our updated graphic for going into June version 3.0. You can see Zabu and Shauna are glowing green. So let's go through this section by section. In the maybe buys, we'll start off the lower right hand side. I mentioned Shauna earlier. I just think that she has got too much RNG associated with her as far as putting those one cost cards on the board. While she's intriguing, I don't think I'm necessarily use my free Series 3 on her. Next, we've got Juggernaut. I do sort of like him if you are into a control aspect. I don't know if I'd necessarily lean in on this. This is one of those type of cards, and I should say this with all of the maybes. You're really only looking at these if you're sort of at the end of your Series 3 climb. If you've got a whole bunch of Series 3 cards, you really need to look at the top row first. As you start to thin that out a little bit, then you look at the should buy, and as you thin it or almost at completion, then you look at the maybes. That's absolutely the first way you should look at this. Having said that, so Juggernaut control card. Colleen Wing is a next critical card on this, where she's really important to a certain archetype with those discards. She really helps you focus in on those lower cost cards. Lockjaw is the next one on this list. I used to love Lockjaw, but the limiting factor of only dropping one card into him per turn does severely hamper him. Still a very powerful card, but it's not necessarily something that I would say, hey, go get this. Now, if you are wanting to play certain deck types with Lockjaw, then yeah, this could absolutely jump up, and that could really be said with any card. Hazmat, I think, is a big impact card. You really need to play with Luke Cage. More on him a little bit later, but I think a solid card. Venom, I do think Venom has the potential to be buffed one more point to 3-4. He still feels decent. I like what he does as far as moving around the board a little bit, but at the same time, I'm not sure that it's all that impactful. He's still just a solid destroy card, but he did technically move down a row within the maybe buys. Next up, I love Goose. I think Goose actually has the potential to be a should buy on this. Great card, very limiting factor, especially in those bounce type deck situations where you want to limit your opponent on not playing high cards in a certain location. Cerebro I've got on here mainly just because it's an archetype. I don't necessarily know if this is really a maybe buy, but I think given that he opens up a wide range of archetypes with it, from all the way from Cerebro 2 to 6 or 7 if you really want to get crazy, but I don't think it's something that you necessarily want to look at. Beast is critical for bounce. If you're into bounce, this absolutely jumps up to should buy. It's a great card for that. Is he going to change a deck insanely? Well, no, but for bounce, he's critical. He's on the edge of the fence there, depending on the type of player you are. Brood is sort of an accessory card, mainly for those like surfer type builds, or maybe your Cerebro 2 type builds. He really is critical for stuff like that. I have him in maybe buy for that reason. Thor, I struggle still having on this. I feel like Thor's play has fallen off dramatically ever since Lockjaw got his nerf. I left him in maybe buy for now, and I hate to say this, but there's a chance that I could see him dropping off this list in the near future. I just think the limited opportunity to pull Mjolnir is maybe not so great for him. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe you want to try to make him a 2-3 and give one more turn opportunity for it. I don't know. That's something to think about. Absorbing Man, I have on maybe buy. There was some talk about maybe pulling him off this list. I am definitely not on board for that anymore. I think Absorbing Man, with some of the things going on in game at the moment, is really nice to have on here. Copying those on reveals can be absolutely critical. Hood could be arguably a higher. Getting that one cost demon, bouncing, all that sort of thing, potentially destroying with Hood and playing the demon later for a 1/6 is a great thing to do. Sentry in a maybe buy is another card that you could potentially put in should buy. You combine them with either using Cosmo or a destroy type situation or a Viper situation, and that's an extremely strong card. Destroyer is critical for certain destroy archetypes. I think he's a great card. Not one I'm sure that I'd want to necessarily use my 1 monthly free purchase on, but he's not bad. Titania is one, again, that could be up a section. She is a card that you really got to think about how you play and how your opponent might play. If you don't know how to play with it, or if it gets frustrating getting too many factors on the board where you've got to really think about, well, hold on a second. Well, wait a minute. Titania's over there. So if and you just don't like that gameplay, you're not going to want to touch her. All right. So now let's jump to the should buy section. All right. Starting off in the bottom right hand corner of the should buy, we've got Taskmaster and Red Skull. These cards used to go hand in hand. They still kind of do. Taskmaster, I think, has evolved into potentially being in some additional other decks. I was playing with him in some of my high Evo, Hulk, Arnim Zola builds, and he was a lot of fun. I still think he's a great use. Red Skull, I think, is absolutely one of the cards due for a buff in the OTA very soon. Captain Marvel being a should buy. She fits in certain archetypes. She seems to fall off a little bit. I do like thinking about combining her with Shuri. I mean, that's a super strong card that you could potentially put out there. And then you Shuri, Captain Marvel, and even Taskmaster. That's a really strong final 3 plays. It's limiting, but you get some power on the board. Spider-Man, I've actually fallen in love with Spider-Man lately. I'm using him a lot in my high Evo, mishmash control type situation. He's a great card. Limiting your opponent, I personally like to typically use him on turn 5. So that way I can lock down a particular location, or sometimes on turn 5 to limit a location on turn 6, or sometimes I'll use him on that turn 4 so someone can't play in like Avengers Compound, which you must play on turn 5. Or sometimes I'll use it on turn 4 to stop access to a location that cannot be played on for turn 6, so that way they can't play it on turn 5 or 6. Spider-Man is a great control card. Arnim Zola, I highlighted him earlier in a video this week about High Evolutionary and moving your Hulk around a bit. He is great. There is some risks playing with him. You've got to really plan ahead and keep one card in a particular lane, or you risk the RNG of it. Arrow, I did drop a row within should buy. I like Arrow. It's kind of sad given that she used to be the #1 absolutely get this card, and now, like, yes, she's still strong, but it's kind of like, well, I mean, all someone has to do is play 2 cards and it might not change the card you want. So because of that reason, not a lot of people are willing to risk Arrow on a play. Psylocke, fantastic card, ramp ability, I love her. She's only 1 turn though. I do have Electro up higher, which is another ramp card. His ongoing is more severe, but I do like that you get him for every turn. Magneto, a fantastic control card, moving moving your opponent all around the board. Now, I will say though, there is some downsides to this. I've been on both sides of the fence with Magneto where I play him and lose because I pull someone's better cards over that I wasn't expecting to play. And I've also been the beneficiary of that where someone plays a Magneto and pulls a card to a location where it's like, oh, thank you for getting me the win. So he really can be a hit or miss card, but it's something to think about. He is very, very strong. Wong is such a interesting card. You know, some people hate Wong, some people love him. I think Wong is still generally a card that's fantastic in the early game. He falls off dramatically later game. He's so easily countered with either an Enchantress or Cosmo or even a Spider-Man. There's a lot of cards that counter him when you see him. It's like, all right, well, let's just drop something there so they can't put thing there. Now, for me, I like Wong a little bit to maybe throw people off with, say, Galactus builds, by the way. Any of you Galactus players out there, I would consider putting Wong in there because confusion is king. Next up, we've got Valkyrie. I've left Valkyrie in should buy for now. I think she's a very strong card. Some people don't like her because she's very niche, but for the time being, I've left her in should buy. She's arguably worthy of the bottom row of should buy, but for now, I haven't touched her. Changing all your opponent's cards to 3 or your own, especially when you pair her up with something like a Sentry and put her on the void spot, that's a free card to bring down to 3. And your opponent might think, oh, I've got that lane 1 over there, no problem. And you might only need 2 or 3 cards in that spot, whereas your opponent might not play any, and or maybe they'll play 1 thinking that they'll be fine. Ultron pairs up with Patriot. I think he's a great card. I have not played the Patriot deck yet. I have the cards for it, but I think Ultron is a critical aspect to have in that. He's a strong card within his own right to get those bots elsewhere. Definitely worthy of the top row of should buy. Silver Surfer is a card that I dropped down a ranking. It's the only card that I changed rankings for. I had him in a must buy, but I've moved off that position for the time being. I think that Silver Surfer is a top row of should buy. If you're really into potentially getting those 3-cost cards on the board, then sure, yeah, move them up. But again, that goes with any sort of archetype that you might be looking at. Mr. Negative is arguably one of my favorite decks to play because it's really easy to know if you've won or you've lost and you don't risk a lot of cubes with them. But the gains on him are really up and down. It can be just so brutal. He's an archetype builder. I have him in the top row of should buy. I do love his archetype. We'll see if he ever adjusts from there, but I feel like this is probably a good position for him, probably for the foreseeable future of the game. Dracula is one of the more important cards to have in the discard archetype. He can really be played in a lot of different card decks. You don't even have to play him with the discard archetype necessarily. You can have that Biggie Smalls with Lockjaw where you've got a bunch of big cards or Hela and just have them out on the board, and then that way it's a card that potentially discards something in your hand if you don't pull your MODOK to be able to nuke everything in hand. He's definitely a solid card in that regard. Shuri, still great, doubling power, really strong. She's definitely fallen off, but still a really good card. Leader, I've moved up within the should buy row. I still think Leader is a strong card. You're not seeing him as much as you used to, but he still is a good card. You can almost always win with a turn 6 play on Leader if you've kept it even remotely competitive. Against bounce decks, no, but if it is a 1-2 card play versus each other and sort of in a slugfest for power, Leader is going to dominate in all of those sort of matchups. Our last section of must buy we'll go through. These are really the type of cards you're going to be looking at if you are nowhere near complete with your Series 3 or maybe just beginning the game. First up, I always like to start off with Daredevil. Getting information from your opponent is so valuable in this game. I saw a great post where someone was talking about making cards like Maximus or Iceman or something like that more powerful by just simply revealing what they're touching. Baron Mordo, that in itself is a good buff. Baron Mordo could see what it puts into someone's hand at 6 cost. Daredevil is in that realm. You know what your opponent's going to do turn 5, and then you can counter that potentially. Zabu is a card that I think is probably going to get dropped this coming month. I don't know for sure. It is a valuable card, but I think it would make sense. It's like, it's good, but it's not like dominant. And I think that would be a goodwill for players who don't have Zabu yet. I think if they lock him still in Series 4, it just feels a little bad and starts making people think more pay to win, but he's not that much of a pay to win card. I think he's just strong. So I've got him in the must buy section because he can do some of that ramping abilities and get you some of those 4-cost cards much cheaper. Next up, we still have Death in the must buy section. Again, big part of the archetype for destroying cards. It's going to also be in a situation where you've got the Biggie Smalls with Lockjaw and small cards to bring stuff like Death out and or your Hela decks. But overall, Death is just a great card given the power behind it and the potential ability to get it for super cheap. Super Scroll I've left in must buy. I think he's good. You're seeing him in some of the high Evo decks that are out there that are trying to potentially pull in Luke Cages. I'm not convinced he's super great there. I do think he's an alternate, but all of that outside of that, anytime ongoing is a popular meta out there. I think Super Scroll is fantastic in copying any of that. Generally speaking though, you've got to be careful because of things that he can copy like this next card. card, Electro. The ongoing from Electro is you can only play one card, and if Super Scroll copies that, that limits yourself a little bit. So that's where sometimes you could potentially argue that Super Scroll is not worthy of a must-buy. But man, when he's good, he's insanely good. With Electro, I mentioned him earlier, it's a ramp card. It helps you get other cards earlier. Now, it also does really indicate to your opponent, hey, I'm probably playing Galactus. On turn 4, I might be playing Doc Ock. I might be playing a Doom Wave situation where I'm trying to get Doom on turn 5 and Odin on turn 6 or anything like that. So Electro, you do have to be careful about, or even a Sandman earlier. Electro into Sandman, I still like the most because that limits your opponent. But all in all, I still think Electro is one of the better ramp cards in the game. Patriot, we still have as a must-buy due to create an archetype. He is one of the ones I've gotten must-buy that could be argued to be dropped to should-buy. Some people might even say maybe buy, but I think there are times where Patriot can be really, really strong. And especially with a high Evo archetype right now, people are seeing all of these cards thinking, oh, it's high Evo. And there's sometimes where I'm like, wait a minute. That I had to click on the card because I was like, I know you're supposed to get the swirled high Evo, but there were times I was thinking, oh, okay, so they're high evolutionary. I wasn't paying attention to the animations, and it ended up being Patriot. So you could throw some people off with that. Going to the top row of must buy. First up, we've got Mystique. She is a fantastic card, copying anything and potentially having that ongoing. Absolutely love her. She's still going to be in this row probably for the foreseeable future. I mentioned last month Luke Cage. He was the winner chicken dinner card to get. I still stick by that as a must buy with this high evolutionary meta. He's something that you need to look at and have. Now again, Enchantress, Rogue, you're going to get hit with those cards, so you got to be smart about when you play them. Next up, arguably the best 6-cost card, or maybe the most balanced 6-cost card in the game, is Doom. So many times I run into Doom and I'm just like, how'd I forget about they could play Doom? How'd I forget about Doom? How'd I forget about Doom? He is a great card, getting 15 power across the board, hard to reach locations that you can get into. Spider-Man him, doesn't matter, Doom's touching him. Anytime you Spider-Man a location and you snap and your opponent's still playing and you think you've got it won, it's probably Doom. Bass, I've still got in the top 4 of this must-buy section. She's great at getting those low power or negative power cards to 3. She's wonderful for the bounce deck, specifically hitting Mysterio to make all the Mysterios worth 3. All in all, a fantastic card. You just got to be smart about when you play her. And then the top 3 in the must-buy, these can arguably be switched around a little bit. Wave, I left in this section. I was originally going to drop her, but the truth is that she is still insanely strong. The control aspect to limit you or your opponent to just one card on a particular turn, especially if it's the last turn and you're playing against a bounce deck, good luck with that. She's great. She-Hulk, I still love in this section. She's probably maybe a little bit less than Wave, but I still like her. Being able to pull her in on turn 4 early is really a big advantage. Or if she's cheaper and you skip turn 2, be able to play her on turn 3, that's a really strong early play. And then last but not least, Sarah. Sarah has dominated the meta forever. It was Sarah Miracle at the beginning before I even started playing the game. She's made a resurgence. She's still great. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point this card does get hit with a slight tick. I don't know what it is off the hand. I mean, even 5-3, I'm like, okay, that doesn't do much. So maybe that tells you it should be dropped down. 5-2, ooh, that hurts. You know, that's like, ooh, you know, maybe a 5-2 Sarah is where she ends up landing. I don't know. But all in all, I think she is a fantastic must-grab card. Dropping her on turn 5 is really fantastic because you don't really risk any Enchantress there or Rogue because the next turn it's the last turn of the game. So you're already getting the advantage of playing her. So in that regard, she's fantastic. So what do you guys think? What should I change in this? What did you completely disagree with? What are you in line with? What are you thinking about getting for next month? By the way, I've got a giveaway. I keep wanting to pay it forward to the community. The video that I did for it is not hitting the metrics that I need to be able to do the giveaway. So if you want to go click that link here, I'm doing a free Trash Panda giveaway. Share with anybody that you can think of out there. Retweet, all that sort of thing. I really want to give one of those away. So the card similar to Luke Cage that maybe is going to affect the meta next month, given that we think it's going to be a move, is going to be Miles Morales. I didn't originally have him on here, but I want to keep in this vein for the potentially upcoming meta. Now, while I had must buy for Luke Cage, I'm not ready to say that for Miles Morales. So for that reason, I'm going to drop him in the top row of maybe buy. Given that the move deck might take over, getting him at a 1 cost for 5 power could be extremely powerful. And I think having him could be very instrumental in the time where we might have move decks take over the meta. So that's all I got. Thank you for making it this far. Let me know what you think about the graphic. We're going to have it on the Discord, link in the description below, in the Marvel Snap resources section of the Discord. So check it out there if you want to see it in the future. If this was helpful, please consider hammering down that like button. Until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day.